a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. New Caledonia. New Caledonia is a special collectivity of France in the southwest Pacific Ocean, 1,210 kilometers east of Australia and from Metropolitan France. The archipelago, part of the Melanesia subregion, includes the main island of Grande Terre, the Loyalty Islands, the Chesterfield Islands, the Belep archipelago, the Isle of Pines, and a few remote islets. The Chesterfield Islands are in the Coral Sea. Locals refer to Grande Terres. New Caledonia has a land area of 18,576 square kilometers. Its population of 268,767 consists of a mix of Kanak people, people of European descent, Polynesian people, and Southeast Asian people, as well as a few people of Pied-Noir and North African descent. The capital of the territory is Nouméa. History. The earliest traces of human presence in New Caledonia date back to the Laputa period circa 1600 BC to circa 500 AD. The Laputa were highly skilled navigators and agriculturists with influence over a large area of the Pacific. British explorer Captain James Cook was the first European to sight New Caledonia, on the 4th of September 1774, during his second voyage. He named it New Caledonia, as the northeast of the island reminded him of Scotland. The west coast of Grande Terre was approached by the Côte de la Pérouse in 1788, shortly before his disappearance, and the Loyalty Islands were first visited between 1793 and 1796 when Mare, Lifau, Tiga, and Uvia were mapped by William Raven. The English whaler encountered the island named then Britannia, and today known as Mare, in November 1793. From 1796 until 1840, only a few sporadic contacts with the archipelago were recorded. About 50 American whalers have been recorded in the region between 1793 and 1887. Contacts became more frequent after 1840, because of the interest in sandalwood. As trade in sandalwood declined, it was replaced by a new business enterprise: blackbirding, a euphemism for taking Melanesian or Western Pacific Islanders from New Caledonia. The Loyalty Islands, New Hebrides, New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands into indentured or forced labor in the sugarcane plantations in Fiji and Queensland by various methods of trickery and deception. Blackbirding was practiced by both French and British Australian traders, but in New Caledonia's case, the trade in the early decades of the 20th century involved relocating children from the Loyalty Islands to the Grande Terre for labor in plantation agriculture. New Caledonia's primary experience with blackbirding revolved around a trade from the New Hebrides to the Grande Terre for labor in plantation agriculture, mines, as well as guards over convicts and in some public works. The historian Dorothy Scheinberg's milestone study, The People Trade, discusses this migration. In the early years of the trade, coercion was used to lure Melanesian islanders onto ships. In later years, indenture systems were developed. However, when it came to the French slave trade, which took place between its Melanesian colonies of the New Hebrides and New Caledonia, very few regulations were implemented. This represented a departure from the British experience, since increased regulations were developed to mitigate the abuses of blackbirding and recruitment strategies on the coastlines. The first missionaries from the London Missionary Society and the Marist brothers arrived in the 1840s. In 1849, the crew of the American ship cutter was killed and eaten by the Puma clan. Cannibalism was widespread throughout New Caledonia. French dependency. On the 24th of September 1853, under orders from Emperor Napoleon III, Admiral Febvre Despointes took formal possession of New Caledonia. Captain Louis-Marie François Tardy de Montravel founded Port-de-France on the 25th of June 1854. A few dozen free settlers settled on the west coast in the following years. New Caledonia became a penal colony in 1864, and from the 1860s until the end of the transportations in 1897, France sent about 22,000 criminals and political prisoners to New Caledonia. The Bulletin de la Société Générale des prisons for 1888 indicates that 10,428 convicts, including 2,329 freed ones, were on the island as of the 1st of May 1888, by far the largest number of convicts detained in French overseas penitentiaries. The convicts included many communards, arrested after the failed Paris Commune of 1871, including Henri de Rochefort and Louise Michel. Between 1873 and 1876, 4,200 political prisoners were relegated to New Caledonia. Only 40 of them settled in the colony. The rest returned to France after being granted amnesty in 1879 and 1880. In 1864 nickel was discovered on the banks of the Diahot River. With the establishment of the Société Le Nickel in 1876, mining began in earnest. To work the mines the French imported laborers from neighboring islands and from the New Hebrides, and later from Japan, the Dutch East Indies, and French Indochina. The French government also attempted to encourage European immigration, without much success. The indigenous population, or Kanak people, were excluded from the French economy and from mining work, and ultimately confined to reservations. This sparked a violent reaction in 1878, when High Chief Atal of Lafoa managed to unite many of the central tribes and launched a guerrilla war that killed 200 Frenchmen and 1,000 Kanaks. A second guerrilla war took place in 1917, with Catholic missionaries like Maurice Lienhard functioning as witnesses to the events of this war. Lienhard would pen a number of ethnographic works on the Kanak of New Caledonia. Noel of Taiamu led the 1917 rebellion, which resulted in a number of orphan children, one of whom was taken into the care of Protestant missionary Alphonse Roule. This child, Wenceslas T., would become the father of Jean-Marie Tjabau. Europeans brought new diseases such as smallpox and measles, which caused the deaths of many natives. The Kanak population declined from around 60,000 in 1878 to 27,100 in 1921. And their numbers did not increase again until the 1930s. In June 1940, after the fall of France, the Conseil General of New Caledonia voted unanimously to support the Free French government. And in September the pro-Vichy governor was forced to leave for Indochina. In March 1942, with the assistance of Australia, the territory became an important Allied base and the main South Pacific Fleet base of the United States Navy in the South Pacific moved to Nouméa in 1942–1943. The fleet that turned back the Japanese Navy in the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942 was based at Nouméa. American troops numbered as many as 50,000, the equivalent of the contemporary population. French overseas territory. In 1946, New Caledonia became an overseas territory. By 1953, French citizenship had been granted to all New Caledonians, regardless of ethnicity. The European and Polynesian populations gradually increased in the years leading to the nickel boom of 1969–1972, and the indigenous Kanak Melanesians became a minority, though they were still the largest ethnic group. Between 1976 and 1988, conflicts between French government actions and the Kanak independence movement saw periods of serious violence and disorder. In 1983, a statute of enlarged autonomy for the territory proposed a 5-year transition period and a referendum in 1989. In March 1984, the Kanak Resistance Front Independentiste seized farms in the Kanak, and Socialist National Liberation Front formed a provisional government. In January 1985, the French socialist government offered sovereignty to the Kanaks and legal protection for European settlers. The plan faltered as violence escalated. The government declared a state of emergency. However, regional elections went ahead, and the FLNKS won control of 3 out of 4 provinces. The centre-right government elected in France in March 1986 began eroding the arrangements established under the socialists, redistributing lands mostly without consideration of native land claims, resulting in over 2/3 going to Europeans and less than 1/3 to the Kanaks. By the end of 1987, roadblocks, gun battles and the destruction of property culminated in the Ouvir Cave hostage-taking, a dramatic hostage crisis on the eve of the presidential elections in France. Pro-independence militants on Nouméa killed 4 gendarmes and took 27 hostage. The military response resulted in 19 Kanak deaths and another 3 deaths in custody. The Matignon Agreements, signed on the 26th of June 1988, ensured a decade of stability. The Nouméa Accord, signed the 5th of May 1998, set the groundwork for a 20-year transition that gradually transfers competences to the local government. Following the timeline set by the Nouméa Accord that stated a vote must take place by the end of 2018, the groundwork was laid for a referendum on full independence from France at a meeting chaired by the French Prime Minister Édouard Philippe on the 2nd of November 2017, to be held by November 2018. Voter list eligibility had been a subject of a long dispute, but the details have since been resolved. On the 20th of March 2018, the government announced an independence referendum that was held and failed on the 4th of November 2018. Politics. New Caledonia is a territory sui generis to which France has gradually transferred certain powers. As such, its citizens have French nationality and vote for the President of France. They have the right to vote in elections to the European Parliament. It is governed by a 54-member territorial Congress, a legislative body composed of members of 3 provincial assemblies. The French state is represented in the territory by a High Commissioner. At a national level, New Caledonia is represented in the French Parliament by 2 deputies and 2 senators. At the 2012 French presidential election, the voter turnout in New Caledonia was 61.19%. For 25 years, the party system in New Caledonia was dominated by the anti-independence, the Rally UMP. This dominance ended with the emergence of a new party, Avenir Ensemble, also opposed to independence, but considered more open to dialogue with the Kanak movement, which is part of the Kanak and Socialist National Liberation Front, a coalition of several pro-independence groups. Customary authority. The Kanak society has several layers of customary authority, from the 4,000–5,000 family-based clans to the 8 customary areas that make up the territory. Clans are led by clan chiefs and constitute 341 tribes, each headed by a tribal chief. The tribes are further grouped into 57 customary chiefdoms, each headed by a head chief, and forming the administrative subdivisions of the customary areas. The Customary Senate is the assembly of the various traditional councils of the Kanaks, and has jurisdiction over the law proposals concerning the Kanak identity. The Customary Senate is composed of 16 members appointed by each traditional council, with 2 representatives per each customary area. In its advisory role, the Customary Senate must be consulted on law proposals concerning the Kanak identity, as defined in the Nouméa Accord. It also has a deliberative role on law proposals that would affect identity, the civil customary statute, and the land system. A new president is appointed each year in August or September, and the presidency rotates between the 8 customary areas. Kanak people have recourse to customary authorities regarding civil matters such as marriage, adoption, inheritance, and some land issues. The French administration typically respects decisions made in the customary system. However, their jurisdiction is sharply limited in penal matters, as some matters relating to the customary justice system, including the use of corporal punishment, are seen as clashing with the human rights obligations of France. Military. The armed forces of New Caledonia FANC include about 2,000 soldiers, mainly deployed in Kanak, Nandai, Tontouta, Plum, and Nouméa. The land forces consist of a regiment of the Troupes de Marine, the Regiment d'Infanterie de Marine du Pacifique. The naval forces include 2 P-400 class patrol vessels, a battrel, and a patrol boat of the Maritime Gendarmerie. The Air Force is made up of 3 Casa transport aircraft, 4 Puma helicopters and a Fennec helicopter, based in Tontouta. In addition, 760 gendarmes are deployed on the archipelago. Status. Since 1986, the United Nations Committee on Decolonization has included New Caledonia on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories. An independence referendum was held the following year. but independence was rejected by a large majority. Under the Nouméa Accord, signed in 1998 following a period of secessionist unrest in the 1980s and approved in a referendum, New Caledonia held a second referendum on independence on 4 November 2018, where 56.9% of voters chose to remain with France. The official name of the territory, Nouvelle Caledonie, could be changed in the near future due to the accord, which states that a name, a flag, an anthem, a motto, and the design of banknotes will have to be sought by all parties together to express the Kanak identity, and the future shared by all parties. To date, however, there has been no consensus on a new name for the territory, although Kanak Republic is popular among 40% of the population. New Caledonia has increasingly adopted its own symbols, choosing an anthem, a motto, and a new design for its banknotes. In July 2010, New Caledonia adopted the Kanak flag, alongside the existing French tricolour, as dual official flags of the territory. The adoption made New Caledonia one of the few countries or territories in the world with two official national flags. The decision to use two flags has been a constant battleground between the two sides and led the coalition government to collapse in February 2011. Administrative divisions. The institutional organization is the result of the Organic Law and Ordinary Law passed by the Parliament on 16 February 1999. The archipelago is divided into 3 provinces. New Caledonia is further divided into 33 municipalities. One commune, Pied-Noir, is divided between 2 provinces. The northern half of Pied-Noir, with the main settlement and most of the population, is part of the North Province, while the southern half of the commune, with only 127 inhabitants in 2009, is part of the South Province. The communes, with 2015 populations in brackets, and administrative centres, are as follows: South Province, North Province, Loyalty Islands Province. Notes: provincial capital. The population of the southern part of Pied-Noir commune is included in that for the northern part. Geography. New Caledonia is part of Zealandia, a fragment of the ancient Gondwana supercontinent. It is speculated that New Caledonia separated from Australia roughly 66 million years ago, subsequently drifting in a northeasterly direction, reaching its present position about 50 million years ago. The mainland is divided in length by a central mountain range whose highest peaks are Montana Pania in the north, and Montana Humboldt in the southeast. The east coast is covered by a lush vegetation. The west coast, with its large savannas and plains suitable for farming, is a drier area. Many ore-rich massifs are found along this coast. The Diahot River is the longest river of New Caledonia, flowing for some 100 kilometers. It has a catchment area of and opens northwestward into the Baie d'Arcor, flowing towards the northern point of the island along the western escarpment of the Mount Pania. Most of the island is covered by wet evergreen forests, while savannas dominate the lower elevations. The New Caledonian Lagoon, with a total area of 24,000 square kilometers, is one of the largest lagoons in the world. It is surrounded by the New Caledonia Barrier Reef. Climate. The climate is tropical, with a hot and humid season from November to March with temperatures between 27 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius, and a cooler, dry season from June to August with temperatures between 20 degrees Celsius and 23 degrees Celsius, linked by 2 short interstices. The tropical climate is strongly moderated by the oceanic influence and the trade winds that attenuate humidity, which can be close to 80%. The average annual temperature is 23 degrees Celsius, with historical extremes of 2.3 degrees Celsius and 39.1 degrees Celsius. The rainfall records show that precipitation differs greatly within the island. The 3,000 mm of rainfall recorded in Gallarino are 3 times the average of the west coast. There are also dry periods, because of the effects of El Niño. Between December and April, tropical depressions and cyclones can cause winds to exceed a speed of 100 km per hour, with gusts of 250 km per hour and very abundant rainfall. The last cyclone affecting New Caledonia was Cyclone Cook, in January 2017. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?